Where do you think it's still falling short? What barriers do you think are probably the most common in the league structures at the moment? And how do you ensure that their voices, whether they're players, coaches, or people connected to the business, are actually heard?
I believe that we have way more women that are leaders. And I believe that we also have several more women that are stakeholders and that are at the stakeholders table. That I believe has grown exponentially in the last 5 to 7 years. And that's amazing. We don't have enough infrastructure that's educational to help our current players transition into the business side of soccer. We at the USL, we are the only US league that has both men's and women's. And so we try to make sure, when we look at our women's infrastructure, that we promote women in leadership roles and bring their wealth of knowledge. The reality is that there is absolutely nuanced differences between the men's game and the women's game. And anybody that wants to deny that is not being real.
Welcome to Football Business TV. I'm absolutely delighted for the latest edition of Women's World to be joined by Betsy Cutler, who is the VP of Corporate Wellness and Safeguarding at the USL. Betsy, how are you?
I am good. It's Friday. Yay.
Always a good start, right? But you're
It
always this
is.
happy anyway. I think I've met you on every day of the week so far over the last few years, and you've definitely got the same vibe about you.
It's how I try to live my life, Mac.
Too short and all that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Now, I
Should
really
I
appreciate you taking
should I not mention I'm holding out for Sunday at 11:30?
No, no, no. I think we all live our lives by the weekends in similar ways. I think
Yeah.
normally when we do these recordings on a Friday, we go, "Have you got a busy weekend planned?" And there are people that are running football clubs or in leagues, and well, yeah, kinda. And this is the least important thing I'm going to do over the next 48 hours.
Oh my God. It's not for me. It's a joy. I'm happy to be here.
No, I think you're too kind. We'll jump straight in. For maybe as a bit of background to people that might not know who you are, can you give us a brief background to Betsy and who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I came to this position in a unique way. My background and my expertise, I own my own consulting company where I went in and did mental health educational presentations and policies and procedures through a mental health lens for all sorts of athletic type of organizations. I would go in and speak with coaches. I would speak with athletes. I might speak with the team. I might speak with front office staff. So that's what I did previously. And so it was all around building wellness and mental health and the intersection of the two of those. And specifically, when you have those infrastructure embedded, there is a direct correlation between what happens out on the field, aka the pitch, when we're talking soccer.
Yeah, yeah, no, of course. And talking of football, as we call it, soccer, as you do, and actually, as you know, I've called it soccer a lot myself over the last few years. What first drew you to the game in terms of, because you're now in a very prominent position at a wonderful organisation that I know pretty well. What drew you to the game initially, and did you always look at leadership within wellness as part of the game, or was it by accident?
It was absolutely by accident. I would say what first came was obviously my expertise and what I
Yeah,
did. I've been doing that for 7 years. I went back to grad school in order to do it. I got my master's in education, focusing on athlete mental health and wellness. I actually did perceptions of mental health from college athletes research. And so that is published. And so I had a pretty good grounding in what I felt was important infrastructure for any sporting organization. My whole goal when I started my company is that I didn't want to go out and do one to one. I didn't want to be therapeutic. I wanted to have systematic change. I wanted to go into systems and change them for the better. And so that was what I was already curating and doing for several years. The soccer thing kind of fell in my lap. I hate to say this, but I was not a big soccer fan. And I'm going to just drop the fact that my son is an Everton fan. And so that's how I came to soccer. And
Yeah.
we went to a friendly that they had in Baltimore. That was my first soccer experience. And so even just being there, understanding the culture, being embedded in it and living through it, it was really a blast. And I did that probably 3 years before this job came to me. In my profession, we have an alliance of professionals that do health and well-being in the athletic systems.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that my predecessor ended up going to the US Soccer Federation to do educational programming for them. And she reached out to me and she said, Betsy, I think this would be a really good fit for you. And I came aboard, and that's how I got to where I am. So I brought my leadership and the well being expertise, and now I'm learning to bridge it into the soccer world as I continue to grow my soccer knowledge.
No, it makes sense. How long ago was that now?
2.5 years. It'll be 3 years in May.
Ah, okay. So your newfound love has been picked up pretty quickly, and you certainly cemented a lot of knowledge around that. As a woman entering a traditionally male dominated world, I guess, and an industry which it still predominantly is, right? Were there early moments that kind of shaped the way that you wanted to lead in the business?
I think trying to understand the actual front office business,
Yeah,
because as you said, that is very male dominated. And so that was the piece. As I said, I know what operate, what pushes players and coaches and how to make them better. I needed to understand the angle from a front office or a stakeholders position, and so I came in absolutely not having that. And so, knowing that the majority of our ownership groups are men, and we are definitely more, and especially when I first got here, we didn't have the Gainbridge Super League, it was
yeah,
just men's leagues. So, that was definitely a challenge, walking in and trying to understand and try to be the ears and the listening in the room in order to better understand how I can connect with them, was really important for me.
yeah. Of course, and I guess that's still an evolving thing, right? Because again, the game's so fast moving that you have to kind of embed what you do, but move with the pace of the game, which is certainly in the women's side of things accelerated at a crazy pace over the last few years. And I think the US have always kind of been at the forefront of that, right? Of women's sport and certainly women's football. And I know the Lionesses have had a great couple of years, but the US have always been a bit of a beacon for US football. How would you describe your leadership philosophy now from maybe when you came in? I'm assuming it's adapted a little bit, but would you have an overriding philosophy in how you do things?
I think at my seasoned age, um,
Oh, no way.
I
27.
that's it. That's me. Yes. I had already pretty much built what my leadership philosophy is. And just, as an FYI, I call it humanistic.
Okay.
I believe that if I meet somebody, I need to model for them that I understand what it's like to be a human. We all suffer failures. We all experience successes, and we all have emotions related to both of those. And so, if I can connect with somebody in that humanistic way, understanding that there's going to be successes and there's going to be failures, but us together, you and me together, or you and the group, whomever together, we're going to work through that and get to the next level and be better for it. I believe that's the human experience. And I believe that is how I try to derive my leadership philosophy.
No, it makes sense. And that could get lost really easily in the current world of data and analytics and the robotic systems that everybody kind of implements. And there are certain areas of the business that must look at that, the coaching and on the on-field stuff, really. But I was talking to a CEO of a football club this morning, and he said that a lot of clubs now are forgetting the human approach. And actually, you need to enjoy being around the people that you work with. You need to, have empathy with them and get on with them. And I'm a big advocate of that kind of stuff as well, right? So it's very easy to overlook that. So I know that you're one of the most personable people I've come across over the last few years, but I know there's another side to Betsy as well, right? What are the non-negotiables for you when it comes to equality, safeguarding, kind of athlete protection? What are some things that you just won't budge on?
So I am strong in truth. And truth means also maybe telling somebody something that they don't want to hear. So truth and honesty is extremely important, even if it's uncomfortable. That's a non negotiable. In the safeguarding world, I have strong belief system in unbiased investigations. So I want to come and look at our investigations from a ground zero position. It's important, honestly, for our coaches to know that because
Yeah.
I think safeguarding in general creates a visceral response, especially in our coaching staff, because that's generally what misconduct is filed
Mm.
on, whom it's filed on. But I want them to know that it's important for me to be able to look at all misconduct in an unbiased way and know that there's going to be some reports that are not true and I need to support the coaches.
Mm.
So it's a non-negotiable for me to be fair and unbiased. So, and that has been difficult sometimes because sometimes you're telling people that have reported that you found something different than what they reported. And so that's not necessarily easy, but I am absolutely committed to that. The other big piece that I can tell you is important to me and honestly is important to our USL leadership, and they embrace it as the way that I have brought it. And that is this term called restorative justice. We believe that there's good people that make bad decisions.
Yeah.
There are some outlying behaviors that there's no excuse, that's out of the realm. But for that 80% that's in there, we want anybody who is found to have misconduct substantiated, that our goal is not to throw you away or cast you away. Our goal is to help you learn from the experience so that you can be better.
Yeah.
And obviously, most of it is coach related. So I need my coaches to know I'm here to support them and make them better. And I want them to stay. Our goal is to keep them in our
Yeah.
ecosystem, just make them better and help them to avoid doing anything in the future. So
Yeah.
restorative justice for me is a non negotiable.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Looking at your experience at league level, it is something we wanted to expand on because it's growing, as we said. But you've cemented yourself there over the last few years. Football is improving for women globally, and I speak to people in different spheres, whether it's agents or players or people supporting the business side of it. There's still a lot of work to do, as we know. A few things. Where do you think it's still falling short? What barriers do you think are probably the most common, I guess, for women or that women are facing in the league structures at the moment? And how do you ensure that their voices, whether they're players, coaches, or people connected to the business, are actually heard?
I will, that's a lot. And so I'll try to break into them and kind of maybe talk about it circularly because they're very
Yeah, yeah,
interrelated. So I will start with what I think is going well. I believe that we have way more women that are leaders, and I believe that we also have several more women that are stakeholders and that are at the stakeholders table. That I believe has grown exponentially in the last 5 to 7 years, and that's amazing. Our barriers, though, in my experience, is that we don't have enough infrastructure that's educational to help our current players transition into the business side of soccer.
yeah,
We need way more programming that is helping to support their job goals when they get out of their career in soccer. And that is honestly really, really missing. And it's so funny because it's twofolded in the fact that how can we bring on more women in stakeholder positions and in leadership positions if we're not giving them the knowledge on how to do it?
Yeah.
So that is a huge, huge miss that we all can do better on. And, there are absolute differences between, I will call it the US soccer world and our European football world,
Yeah, nicely done.
as it comes to women. And
Yeah.
so I think another interesting piece there is that there is a very interesting climbing of using women in men's leagues because women have leadership skills, and it doesn't matter on whether they're male or female. They can bring unique and creative ideas even to the men's leagues. And
Yeah.
I think we've seen a few more of our women leaders developing and being heard and a part of our men's ecosystems, which I think is great. And I also think it's important.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. We've certainly seen that at events that we've been to over the last few years. When you look at kind of speakers and prominent females that are on both sides of the game in male and female, and some of them doing incredible executive jobs on both sides of the water. Right, we just want, as a dad of daughters, we just want more of them, and to be
Yeah,
better
yeah.
represented. But like you say, they need that ground in the education to be able to go and deliver the jobs properly. And certainly, it's probably. Do you think that's more important for the women's game than it is the men's? Because if you look at the disparity in terms of earnings in a career, if you look at Europe as an example, the women are catching up, of course, but they're still miles behind the earnings of the guys, which means their post playing careers are a little bit limited in terms of what they can do. Right, they have to either study or find another career. So it's probably even more important that the women get that support. Right.
Absolutely. I do agree with that. I also, we need to provide them opportunities and be open to having them come and be inside our clubs and our leagues as well. So that I think is also something that we can continue to grow on. I know, for example, we at the USL, we are the only US league that has both men's and women's. And so we try to make sure, when we look at our women's infrastructure, that we promote women in leadership roles and bring their wealth of knowledge. The reality is that there is absolutely nuanced differences between the men's game and the women's game. And anybody that wants to deny that is not being real.
Yeah.
There are absolute differences. And so there is an element of, if you have a female soccer player that transitions into a leadership role, they are going to understand those nuanced differences significantly better than, I mean, even me who wasn't in there. I was
Mm.
not a soccer player. So that's an interesting dynamic that I think we need to lean into, and we need to help educate our players to know that they have skill sets that they have built just by playing soccer, being part of a team, being leaders in the team, that can translate up the ecosystem. So it's also teaching them and giving them confidence in order to know where they're going to go. Um, I will tell you something that I gave to my kids, and I believe that they have utilized it. And that is, if you know your passion, we can assume their passion is soccer. You have to know your skill set. What is it that you do really, really well? And if we can get our female players to understand that dynamic, create that intersection, and then they will be able to direct their own pathway into soccer outside of just playing on the pitch. So that's another function that I think that we are behind in, that we need to also build the confidence and build um, educational pieces so that they can know what they are good at. So some
Yeah.
aptitude and skills testing, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I'm all for, if you love the game, you can find out what else you're good at that complements the industry, right? Because there are so many jobs that you can do attached to the game now. And again, that probably comes down to the education and opportunity, which probably go hand in hand. Um, Sorry,
I
go on.
would say I would add on there that the difference, because that was partly one of your original piece, and that was I think our men tend to have more confidence to be able to transition into a soccer industry from being a player. And I believe our female players don't have that same level of confidence to do that. So that's one big difference between the males and the females that we can continue to work on.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Actually, do you think that that confidence or lack of confidence comes from support, or is that just a maybe a few generations behind? Because that's effectively what the women's game is, right? You look at post-war numbers, and it just speaks for itself in terms of the opportunity for women in the game. Is that just that we're a few generations behind from a women's perspective?
I actually do believe that is true. I believe that uh, our ladies, because we're just in the infancy of building that pathway up to the pros and having a number of pro divisions, that our ladies are really just consumed with getting there
Yeah,
and proving their worth and proving their skill set on the pitch, that by focusing on that they may not be focusing on the other things outside of sport that
good
are
point.
going to help build them from a personal perspective. So yes, I believe that.
Yeah, good point. Because you see quite a lot of the men studying or focusing on post playing career stuff while they're playing. But I've spoken to agents of women, particularly, that say actually, that the girls are more focused on just having a career because that's the original tough part, right? And we'll worry about what happens afterwards, which is again, I would imagine, going to be a difficult approach to take because it leaves you in sometimes no man's land, right? In terms of space of 6 months, a year, 2 years, where you might not know what you're doing, which I would imagine it impacts on mental health and things like that, which is something I'd like to touch on as well, because mental health and safeguarding are normally discussed kind of hand in hand, right? Whether or not you believe that should be the case, I don't know. But why do you think it's critical that they're addressed alongside the obvious things at the moment, which are focused on growth and visibility and the commercial side of the game?
So we need to be able to look at the player holistically. And that also plays into our previous conversation. We have to look at who they are holistically because they're not going to be on the pitch forever. Which is why we need to look at what are they going to be when they're done with the pitch.
Yeah,
Same thing here. That health and well-being is an integral part of their, even just being a player. I try, that's one of the, and I think I may have mentioned that earlier, is that it's important for our infrastructure, our leaders, our stakeholders to make that connection that if a player is in a positive, cultured locker room and that you all are comfortable with addressing health and well-being and resiliency, that is only going to make your players better. It's
yeah,
going to make them better players, better people, and better teammates. And when you have those types of players on your team, it's going to transition to the W's
yeah.
and L's on the game days. It just does. There's numerous studies that show that.
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely agree with that. Is there a moment for you personally that stands out, whether with a player or a coach or an associate, that you've stood back and thought, this is why my work truly matters?
I do have a really good example, and it's through misconduct. So let's start with safeguarding. It's so funny, when I first got the role here and I was interviewed, they were like, what's the intersection of well-being and safeguarding? I was like, well, if there's misconduct, there pretty much needs to be aftercare, which is health and well-being. So when we combine misconduct, the ideology of restorative justice, as well as health and well-being, we put all three of those together, then what we have is we have a system where, let's say, an example is that a head coach has substantiated misconduct claims. From there, my philosophy is that my goal is to make the coach better. So, in corrective actions, they meet with me. We assign books, we'll read them together, we'll have discussions about what put them in the position to do the misconduct, what are some skills and techniques that they can utilize to avoid doing them in the future. And then we talk. I always end all of my sessions with the coaches with how can we create a positive culture within your team setting, because that's ultimately what everybody's goal is. So I had that experience. I went through that with a head coach. I will tell you, every single head coach that I've gone through that process with, I would say we are still good friends and they still reach out to me. And this happened with this specific coach. They reached out to me and said, "It's the beginning of the season. I just want to know, can we have a meeting and talk about what my goals are, where I'm going, and the culture that I want to create this coming season?" I was like, absolutely. So we had that
Yeah.
meeting, and really I felt like as like you're in a great place, and I'm so proud of the work you've done. I'm so proud of your goals. I think this is amazing. And at the end of the season, they were in the finals.
Ah, brilliant.
And I'm just sorry. That's how safeguarding health and well-being and restorative justice all work in combination with one another to make the coach better and make the culture better. That for me was is still today. It makes me very excited.
No, it should do. There's no better impact than getting to the final, right? So whether you've delivered something on the pitch or off it, it's a huge contribution towards that. And yeah, no, I love that story. What responsibility do the leagues and governing bodies have, in your opinion, to ensure that women's football grows with real equality in terms of care and standards and protection of players?
All right, this might be a controversial statement,
Oh,
but
we like those.
I'm going to say it anyways. I personally believe in the U.S., and I feel like I've got a unique position because I service both men's and women's leagues.
Yeah,
And so I feel confidently that across gendered leagues, there is a dedication to equality and professionalism and all the things and the standards. And specifically for me in my role, because I deal with both, I my standards cross everything,
yeah.
even our youth and our pre-pro divisions. So I feel really good where that is. The controversial piece is based on my research and my conversations with coaches that have contacts with players that are still back in Europe and having direct conversations with European female players. I think Europe has a lot of room to grow on having equity between female footballers and male footballers. They've got a long way to go. And so I don't say that as throwing shade on our European
No,
friends,
I agree.
but they they need to raise the standards of their women's systems significantly. Um, and one of my bigger concerns, I'll be honest with you, from a safeguarding perspective, is I can't tell you the number of times I've been reached out to by somebody speaking on behalf of a European female player that has experienced misconduct and they don't know where to go and what to do. And I find that I struggle with that. And that's a little disheartening. But I will do whatever I can do to support them and help them.
Mm.
That's just what my nature is. But I would love to be able to help support the European system to level up for the women's game.
I absolutely agree. I don't know whether you know Tracy Smith from PCSS. We interviewed Tracy a few weeks ago. She does lots of work with football clubs in the UK. She's incredible in player welfare in the main. And she said during the interview, actually, what you just touched on, the amount of clubs, and there are some really good ones. She highlighted like London Lionesses, who are brilliant. and some others that are very good. But she said you'd be amazed at the amount of clubs that don't even have a welfare officer for female players, and these are professional clubs. And I would love to, at the risk of being sued, to name who they are, because that's incredible, right? That's surely got to be the very basic of rights for a player, to make sure that your welfare is taken care of. I mean, they didn't have contracts that reflected things like maternity and having babies and things like that. And I'm just like, it's incredible.
Frustrating, isn't it? And it's sad. It is
Yeah.
sad. It is
I mean,
sad.
could you pick another industry where, a woman got pregnant, for example, and said, "Oh, I need to go on maternity," and said, "Well, actually, we're just going to cancel your contract." The lawsuits would be coming out of your ears, right? And somehow football gets away with it, and it shouldn't. And we'd love to help call that out where we can. Um, Following that, what does true? It might be a really easy one for you to answer because you're in the coalface, but what does true equality, in terms of the male and female game, look like for you?
That's an interesting question. I believe opportunity, which we've already discussed. There are
Yeah.
barriers between the men's and the women's game for that, for opportunity. I would also say um, probably education. I would also say um, probably mental health and well being needs to be addressed between the men's and the women's. Um, that might actually be a default, that there's less in the men's and more in the women's. So we have to look at equality from both sides.
Hmm.
So those are probably be the top three that I would say there is lack of equality on. I think we all know, as you just mentioned 5 minutes ago, pay in the women's game. I think that, specifically, I believe is a way larger gap in the European system than it is in the US. So I mentioned that only as a side because obviously we want players, no matter their gender, to be paid what their value is. So that's kind of an obvious statement, but I think it's definitely more of an issue in the European system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There are some men earning 10 times what women do annually in a week. So it's pretty incredible, really. And I do think clubs could be doing more as well in terms of commercialization. So in terms of sponsorships and commercializing, and stopping young women feeling that they have to go and be models before footballers or Instagram influencers to top the pay packet up and let them concentrate on their career and share the commercial revenues around a little bit more. But that might be, I won't ask you to comment on that one because you're on maybe official club business or official league business, so we won't do that today. What I will ask you to do though is to offer some advice to a young woman looking to break into the world of football. Um, but they don't necessarily see themselves as represented, and probably touches on to the opportunity thing that we touched on a little while ago. What advice would you give to them in terms of things they should look for, and what needs do you think they're going to have to seek to fulfill, I guess, in order to support their journey?
I think they need to start with my philosophy, and that is know your passion and know your skill set. You you're not going to be able to move forward in any career you choose if you don't know ultimately where you'd like to be in 5 years. You don't need to know where you want to end up, but you want to
Yeah.
know where your goal is in 5 years. Let's keep it short term. And when you know your skill set, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's operational, maybe it's a coach, whatever that skill set is that you believe you're strongest in, you need to make those intersections. And then you need to find the most critical thing is a mentor that is doing that job, that is a woman fulfilling the role that you want. All of us in our industry are more than willing to be mentors. I
Yeah.
have a staff member that's a female. It's my responsibility to mentor her as she grows in the game and in our roles. I have been a mentor for a number of very young colleagues that are just starting their leadership roles. So understand that there are people that are there to support you and to help you. You just need to know what it is you want to do. And
Mm.
when you have that, you can find that person. And I guarantee you, I don't know any woman that would say or decline being a mentor for somebody that wants to rise up through the soccer industry in a business sense. So that would be my second step. My third step would be is that they need to continue their educational journey, continue growing, and do whatever it takes to help build their confidence. It's going to take those three in order to propel them away from the pitch into where they want to go.
Yeah, I agree. I love the mentor idea actually, and I think you're right. I think women that I've dealt with in the industry would be much more inclined to open their door and show a young woman how to elevate themselves. Maybe the men are a little bit more, the young guy is a threat to me. Maybe I won't do that, but women would certainly do that, and I love that. That makes complete sense. Betsy, this has been an absolute pleasure as always. It's great to catch up with you. I think the last time was in Amsterdam and we spent dinner talking about Biggie Smalls and your love for rap music, which was awesome. But
Yes.
I've really enjoyed coming back to talk to you in a professional capacity, and hopefully we'll get the chance to see you when you're over in I would say sunny Stoke. That might be pushing it just a little bit, but in the meantime, this has been Women's World for Football Business TV. Betsy Cutler, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for the invite. Always a joy to meet with you and always a joy to talk about how we can strengthen the women in the soccer industry.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it.